Hello, trading has closed on the 2nd of December 2024. We always do our disclaimer first, go over our calls, make our predictions. It's my trading plan for Tuesday, December 3rd, 2024. Please remember I can be wrong, trade at your own risk. Remember, my system gives targets, it says nothing about the entries. We had mixed signals. Commonest thing is a gap and a prompt move outside the day's range. Next most common is close little change, big move the next day. Well, here's your gap and a prompt move outside the day's range. The wall until the close often reversed immediately, and that's what happened, showing there was a false move. Next most common is close little change and big move the next day. I call little change a 1/4% or less. It's 0.24%, so we got the next most common thing too. Now we don't have to have a big move the next day since we already had the most common thing, but usually that's what happens. And today had the early low with an irregular pattern, so does tomorrow. Well, during the day, MEJT said these drops were false. We've already retraced. It doesn't tell us anything about tomorrow. This is usually a day with an early low and a late high. We got that. Usually we close near the high, and if we don't, it's negative and should lead to lower prices, but tomorrow's open can substitute for today's high, so if we do take it out early, that's the same thing as closing over it. We're not going to know that till we open. We kept up, hit a higher high, closed under all these highs. That's negative, but again, tomorrow's open can substitute for this close. If we gap and take this out early, all that negativity goes away. So all this is saying, if we don't take this out fast, the gap can be in either direction. But if you don't gap and take this out fast, we should trade lower. It isn't a guarantee we're going to close lower. Well, we're still stalling right at these trend lines. There's no rule that says you have to break right away, but we have a lot of things compatible with a top here, even though it's December and markets don't usually make big tops in Decembers. The longer we go without actually dropping, the less likely it is we are going to drop, because the calendar just doesn't allow for it, and we had everything lined up. All the signals were there. All we had to do was reverse, take out some of these lows here, like this one, and that hasn't happened. And when these things fail, they can fail big. You don't have to play with the count too much to get an A and a B, and you don't have to get an expanded flat the way we did yesterday. We're still banging right up against this trend line. The longer we bang against it, the greater the chance we're going to break through. But you really want to break through by gapping over it. And if you don't, I wouldn't trust it. Now, if we gap over this and keep it, signals or no signals, you can just keep on going. But if we drop from here and take out these lows, I would tend to believe it. And, making a guess as far as which direction just isn't my thing. It's kind of a dangerous thing to try to pick tops. You can be rewarded if you're right, but can really get hurt badly if you're wrong, and if you're right, there should be plenty of time to jump on the train. December is just not when I look for the market to top out, but all the elements are there if and only if we start to correct, and that hasn't happened yet. Well, tomorrow's pattern is the early low with an irregular pattern. It doesn't tell us where we open. Today's normally bullish pattern didn't close near its high. In addition, we gapped up, hit a higher high, but closed under intraday highs. Each of these patterns require us to gap, promptly trade over the high a day to avoid seeing lower prices tomorrow, but even if that happens, it doesn't mean that we have to close lower. Standard & Poor's hit a new all-time high today. Transports were actually down. We've got divergence at the top. We have top signals galore. We just haven't started to drop. And if you get your signals and you don't drop, you have to be prepared to switch gears. We have a number of signals at the top here, but until we start to drop, it's possible for the signs to fail. Ideally, bulls need to gap over the trend line we showed earlier to maintain that gap, and if so, we can keep going up. Ideally, bears need to undercut some intraday lows if we're going to have a correction. Because we close little change today, the odds favor, but don't require a big move tomorrow. December is not the time of year in which markets make major tops, so even if we do decline here, I expect us to trade higher before too much time passes. I mean, if we drop here, I can justify a sizable drop which then corrects, but if we go up here, I sure wouldn't fight it. I mean, this is resistance, and the resistance either holds or it breaks, and I'm not a person who likes to guess. So it's the pattern with the early low, possibility, but not a requirement for a big move tomorrow. And if we open way up here and keep going, we're probably going higher. If we open down here and keep dropping, we're probably going lower. And if something else happens, who knows? We might just churn a bit. This is one of those make or break times to fish or cut a bait. And the pattern with the early low, and that's today's call.